having me. I'm the University Minister at Nebraska Wesleyan, and Pastor Michelle has been a very good friend. So when she asked me to come here and preach, I absolutely, yes, of course. You have a really good pastor. I know you don't know that yet. But she's an excellent pastor, and I'm excited that she will be with you, for this season, like this church. So when she asked me to come and preach, I look at the scriptures, and the scripture from Amos. I never preached out of that scripture, and so I never really studied it. And I said, that's the one that I want to focus on. So what I want to do this morning is just to share a little bit of what I learned, and what I think that, what I think that the Spirit is leading us to do today. The book of Amos is the oldest or the earliest form of prophecy that we have in the Bible. It was the first book of all those, the 12 prophets. And I'm not going to name them all because I don't know them all. But of all those 12 prophets, that it was the first one that was written. And it was written about 800 years before Jesus was born. About 800 years. It was a time of relative peace in the kingdom. At the time, there were two kingdoms. There was the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, the one where the descendants of David have been kings for ever since David. And then the northern kingdom, which was larger, and it's known as the kingdom of Israel. Amos, he was a shepherd. And also because shepherding was not that profitable to make ends, to make, to meet, his needs, his family's needs. There we go. He also did. He was a farmer of sycamore trees. And one good day, the Lord called him and said, "Amos, I need you to go to the northern kingdom." Amos was a shepherd and a sycamore farmer from the southern kingdom. And God asked him to go to the northern kingdom and prophesy. Now, the prophecy that Amos was preaching, what the Lord was asking him to say, it was not about mermaids and rainbows. It was very difficult things to hear. It was the proverbial doom and gloom. The people in the northern kingdom, they were wanting for the day. They were seeking for the day of the Lord. They thought that the day of the Lord would be a vindication for them. But Amos was telling them, no, you don't know what you're asking. The day of the Lord will be a very difficult time for you, because that is when God brings judgment to the people. In fact, God was not really happy with the people in the northern kingdom. God was not happy at all. The verses that precede what we read this morning, that immediately precede, God gives Amos a few visions. The first vision is to send locusts to eat all the crops. And that's not good. That's not a good day when you lose all of your crops. And Amos intercedes and said, "Lord, please don't do that." And God said, "Okay, I won't do that. Then I will rain fire on them." And Amos says, "Well, when fire, no, that's not a good day either, Lord. But please don't do that. Don't rain fire on them." But God was really, really upset. One of the early prophecies that in chapter 5, this is one of the oracles, one of the messages that God gives to Amos. to tell the people. This is chapter 5, verse 7. Doom to you who turn justice into poison and throw righteousness to the ground. The one who made the Pleiades and Orion and turns deep darkness into the morning and darkness the day into night. Who summons the waters of the sea and pours them out of the surface of the earth. This one's name is the Lord, who causes destruction to flash out against the strong, so that destruction comes upon the fortress. They hate, and this is when the description, when we get an idea of what's going on in the Northern Kingdom. They hate the one who judges at the city gate, and they reject the one who speaks the truth. Truly, because you crush the weak, and because you tax their grain, you have built houses of carved stone, but you won't live in them. You have planted pleasant vineyards, but you won't drink their wine. I know how many are your crimes, and how numerous are your sins, afflicting the righteous, taking money on the side, turning away the poor who seek help. Therefore, the one who is wise will keep silent at that time. It is an evil time. Now, think about it. This is a time. This is a time of relative peace for them, prosperity for them. Later on, Amos, another prophecy or another oracle that he gives to the people, something that God asked him to tell them, is that God didn't care about their religious festivities. They will faithfully do all the holidays. They will faithfully come together for worship. They will faithfully offer sacrifices to God. But on the other hand, they will cheat in business. They will oppress the poor. They will take advantage of the weak. And God tells them, this has to stop. This has to stop. I don't care about your religion, basically. I care about the way that you treat one another. In chapter 5, there's a verse that has been quoted much, particularly in the civil rights movement, that is an exhortation. And God tells the people, let justice roll down like waters. Let righteousness be ever flowing like a river, like a stream, like a river. And these are very tough words. God explains to them, I have a plumb line to measure you, and you're not measuring up. And I think, this was what, 2,800 years ago, 3,000 years ago. But I think that the heart of God is still the same. And the words that Amos shared with the people of Israel are words that we need to take seriously as well. We need to take seriously for ourselves. God is deeply committed to justice and righteousness, and so should we. But the question is then, what does that mean, right? What does it mean for justice and righteousness, for us to be just and righteous? Myself, when I think about justice, I think about our justice system. And, I grew up in it, or not in it, but knowing about it. And when someone does something wrong, they're punished. So there's all these laws that we need to follow. And if we break them and we're caught, and we don't have enough money to defend ourselves, we're punished. We're punished. But it doesn't seem to me that is God's sense of justice. Sometimes it's interesting how we take positions in regardless of some values, but how God sees them very differently than the way in which we see them. What does it mean for God, for us to be just, for us to be righteous? You know, the connection with Amos is the Gospel of Luke. And here we have the story of the Good Samaritan. And it is the idea, it is for Jesus, this is the idea of what it means to be right, what it is to be just. And you heard the story, and you've heard the story a million times, possibly. That there's this man that is going from Jerusalem on a road, and he's assaulted, and he's robbed, and he's left for dead. But that's just the beginning of the story. Then two very religious people, a Levite and a priest, they walk by and they don't help him. Possibly because they are afraid. We don't know. We don't know the motivations of our hearts. But then this man, a Samaritan, who is Samaritans and Jews are sworn enemies. So at this time in biblical history, when Jesus told his story, they were sworn enemies. And the Samaritan stops, helps this man, has mercy on this man, and takes care of him. And for Jesus, that is what justice is to see the other person as different as that person might be. See the other person as a person. See the other person as someone that has been made in God's image. So someone that is created and loved. Someone that is a child of God. That is what justice is. That is what righteousness is. Cornel West, who is a college professor and a philosopher and activist, he said that in very simple terms, justice is what love looks like in public. Justice is what love looks like in public. And I just love that, because I think that embodies or summarizes in a beautiful way what God expects of us. Justice is to love other people, is to be there for other people, regardless of how different they are. About 20 years ago, I heard a story about a priest. His name was John, and bless you. And he was a priest in England. Now, John has always wanted to be in ministry with the poor. But in all the parishes that the bishop sent him, he was unable. So at this last parish where he was sent, what he decided to do, he thought outside the box, and he went ahead and took a side job as a street sweeper. Now, I don't know about you, but street sweeping is not at the top of the job search opportunities in any country. It is at the very low opportunities for employment. And he didn't reveal to anyone that he was a priest. He just spent time with all these people who were hard-working people, and was able to share life and make community with them. Now he was older, so he was slower than the younger ones. But at the end of the day, the younger ones will not mind taking care of what John couldn't do because he was a really good speaker. So whenever they have a need to speak with their employer or any other need that needed for someone to advocate on their behalf, John was really good at it. So in that way, they complemented each other. One day, one of the street sweepers died. He was very ill. No one really knew about it, how ill he was until the day that he died. And they mourned their passing, his passing, I'm sorry. They mourned his passing, and they were always, or they began to ask themselves, if we only knew, we could have done something for him. But then John stands up and he says, maybe we can do something for him. Still, we can have a funeral service for him. And they went with it. They organized the service. And at the time of beginning the service, John stands up and he is dressed as a priest. And he takes all of the other street sweepers by surprise. They didn't know that John was a priest. And then one of them stands up and says, "Are there any other priests among us?" Which for me is a powerful story of being together, being in the place where people are hurting the most. And that is justice. To love other people, even those who are drastically different than us, those who are hurting the most. To love them. That is justice. About 15 years ago, my wife was appointed, she's also a pastor, to a church. The parsonage was an open country church, and the parsonage was right next to the church. It was a church, the church's cemetery in our house. But we had a very large yard, and I said, I'm going to build my kids a play structure. One of those that I could go to the store and buy, and then I have to assemble myself. So I went to the store and I bought it, and I opened the instructions, and the instructions said, it should take a weekend for 2 people to build it. So I said, oh, that's great. If I do it by myself, then it will take about 6 days, right? 5-6 days. 2 weeks later, finally, the structure was finished. And it had a slide, it had a fort, it had a climbing wall. The way I'm describing it sounds like really huge and impressive, but it's not. It's not. And actually, I made a box with all the leftover pieces from that structure, and that box has grown with all the leftover pieces of other things that I have assembled in the house. But I realized that companies like to put extra things, like bolts and screws, right? Well, anyway. And the kids played in it, and I was so excited until I took the first picture of it, and I realized that it was the leaning play structure of Cummings, Kansas. Now the kids were small, so I figured, they're not heavy enough to take it down. But I figured if I would have used a plumb line, I would have known what straight was, what was the right way to put it. A few years later, at the next place that we moved, they asked me to build him a fort, and I built him a fort. And this time I used a plumb line, and it was straight. It was sturdy. They didn't use it at all, but I did. It was great. Thanks to the plumb line, I felt the assurance that I knew that it was right. The plumb line that God is speaking about, the plumb line that measures our righteousness, our justice, how well we are, that plumb line that God uses is love. Are we loving in the right way? Are we making our love public? Are we advocating for those who are hurting the most, those who are forgotten, those who are being considered as less than human? Now, these people are not just on the border. These people are in all of our communities. We need to love.